spend each Christmas with Julian at the embassy. John has said that as a father, you just go on. You fight for your children. Let's welcome John Shipton.
A great pleasure to be here on this anniversary celebration of 1 year's events in front of the town hall on the steps. I'd just like to show appreciation and gratitude. I'd also like us all to keep one thing in mind always, that when you read the phrase crimes against humanity, that refers to crimes against you, against me, our children and mothers and fathers. When you read the phrase war crimes, like we did last week, couched in the term unlawful killings, that means crimes against you, your parents, me, your children, your aunts and uncles, and anybody in a community that the state takes the privilege upon itself to dispose of. After 1945, the United Nations was established, and within the United Nations were established human rights and conventions of asylum. Australia was one of the authors in 1973, which the UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, approved with only 16 abstentions and 2 voting against. It was a great event. That was under the Whistleblower government. That is, those conventions of asylum that Australia didn't actively support when Julian was in the Ecuadorian embassy, allowing Julian to cross the United Kingdom's land to take up asylum in Ecuador. Australia made not a sound, despite being one of the authors of these great conventions. Equally, the European nations, having lost 50 million dead and every nation partially destroyed, instituted human rights legislation in the Council of Europe and embedded it in every European nation's legislation. So these nations abridge their own laws in the pursuit of Julian and the pursuit of their follies, what they call geopolitical great games or any other pseudonym for ambitions which require the destruction of a country and the murder of people. Gideon Polya, who's an Australian, lives in Melbourne, is an author, has estimated accurately that the wars in the last 20 years have created 38 million refugees of one sort or another seeking asylum right around the world. This is a heinous figure. Also, Gideon estimates that the wars in the last 20 years have produced 5 million deaths. And how to make those terms somehow or other realistic for us, so that we can insist that our governments stop and obey their own laws. We don't ask for other laws to be in place, just the laws that are there. 5 million. So you multiply that by the average of 4 people. That's 20 million people grieving over the last 20 years of their children, their mothers, their fathers, their uncles and aunts and grandfathers, murdered. Those souls in the imagination circle the earth seeking some sort of justice. So in the defence of Julian Assange, we assist in some small way, each of us, to bring justice to those 38 million, to those 5 million, and to some comfort for the 20 million who grieve loss. Thank you.
He was arrested and charged with espionage, a charge he denied. He was held in the notorious Prey-Sar prison, convicted of espionage and sentenced to 6 years following a trial that was widely criticised by human rights activists and politicians in Australia. James was jailed for 15 months until he was pardoned by Cambodian authorities. Following the indefatigable lobbying and media awareness efforts of his family and the eventual reluctant but active intervention of the Australian government, I'd like to welcome James Ricketson.
Shortly after I found myself in Prey-Sar prison, charged with being a spy, I had access to a mobile phone, and a friend of mine at my behest sent a message to Julian, and within an hour we got a response from Julian which was comprised advice on how best to deal with the Australian government, which at the time was reluctant to do anything to help me. So first and foremost, my thanks go to Julian for his concern for my well-being, and I understand, I've just learnt recently, that the same applies for his cousin, Kylie Moore-Gilbert. Apparently he has also been lobbying for her behind the scenes. Of course, my professional concern also is that as a journalist and as a filmmaker, I could very well have, back in 2010, if I'd come into possession of the documents that he came into possession with, have found myself in Julian's situation, because I think along with most of the people that I know, most of my filmmaking friends, if they'd had access to that material, they too, like myself, would have broadcasted, published it, included it in a film, a documentary that they'd made. So there, but for the grace of God go I. My dose of prison was only 15 months, very small compared to what Julian's been through, and I think fairly insignificant compared to what Kylie has been through. But the point I think that is worth making now, as we approach Christmas and as the date of Julian's court case, or the result of his hearing arises in January, is that after quite a bit of hesitation, the Australian government did actually step up to the plate and do what it could to get me released from jail. It took a long time, but it eventually happened. And the reason why it happened was because there were a lot of people in Australia, members of my family, my friends, members of the community, who signed petitions which got to 108,000 all up. Plus I had the media on my side, and so I learned that if you've got a combination of media interest in your situation and also the support of an enormous number of people in the general public, the government eventually has to listen. So for anybody who might be listening to me now, if you have the opportunity to write a letter to your local member, I've done quite a bit of this, and you'd be surprised how many of them actually respond. Write a letter to your local member, write a letter to the Foreign Minister, to Scott Morrison, do whatever you can, including coming to events like this, to let the government know that you really do care about Julian Assange's fate. Let's see, what else can I...
Sign a petition.
Oh, sign a petition. There is a petition that's been signed by 500,000 people. I've got mixed feelings about petitions. I mean, I think they're wonderful, but they shouldn't replace actually doing something. I think that governments can very easily ignore petitions, but they can't necessarily ignore a lot of people in the street marching for something, or some kind of theatrical event that draws attention to the situation that Julian's confronted by, and the situation that we're all confronted by, really. David Hicks's father famously put himself in a cage in Martin Place and elsewhere in the world to draw attention to his son's plight. So I think that we need some of that kind of theatre. Thank you to all those people who were involved in helping me get out of jail. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Let's welcome former Army Major David McBride. Thank you, David.
It's very moving to be here today. I've had so much support over the past week, and before that, of course. A lot of it, my supporters come from Julian Assange's supporters, and there's a real synergy between the two cases. And I agree with the central messages which are on the placards here today. We need to make leaders responsible for the crimes that they've committed. It's far too convenient to put whistleblowers and publishers in jail. It's gone on for too long. We need to stop it. You all know that. And all I can say is that I'm extremely grateful for your efforts. You do count. You know, everyone who supports counts and helps the whistleblower. I know I've been very close to the edge a number of times in my struggle. What keeps me going is the emails I get from friends, from supporters, from people, and it really keeps me going. So if you're thinking, do I send another email? Do I come out on Friday afternoon? The answer is yes. It really helps people like me, people like you, doing what you do. And we need to move this in Australia. If we can get the charges dropped against myself, it will help Julian. And the latest thing I saw today was moves for the Chief of the Australian Defence Force to resign. Now, I think if we can all get behind that, that's good, because again, we need to start taking the focus of leakers and people at the bottom and putting the focus where it deserves to be, on the people at the top. Okay, you all know that, but keep up the pressure, because the good news is, I'm just going to get off soon because my lawyer's going to give me the hook, but I will say there is movement. Don't think your time is wasted or it's never going to end. It's a bit like the anti-Vietnam War protesters. I can see we are going to win this. We really are going to win this, and in the next year, not in the next 10 years. So keep up the good effort, and you know, you're on the right side of history, so thank you.
Thank you, David. Now I'd like to ask his lawyer, Mark Davis, to come forward, former investigator and barrister at law, Mark Davis. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I'll be very quick, I promise. But there's something I've reflected on. It didn't first occur to me when I met David, but of course I've straddled this story from Julian Assange in 2010. I was with him when he was in his hot little hand. The Afghan war logs was about to release them. I experienced that with Julian and the outrage I felt for Julian since then, and now to get McBride on the other end of it. But Julian could have saved certainly the Brereton report if anyone had paid proper attention to it. He revealed in 2010 the behaviours of international forces in Afghanistan. A lot of deaths would have been saved if that had been given the due interest that it should have, instead of the distraction of who is this shocking young Australian doing terrible acts against America. It was and I know in Julian's heart that he was always a bit disappointed that people concentrated on attacking him and the froth and bubble around it all without analysing what was in those documents. To think that, as we've now seen from the Brereton report, that the worst Australian actions happened 2011, 2012, 2013. This was the disaster zone for Australia's reputation. It was just as David was coming into it. That was after WikiLeaks. I mean, unbelievable. After the Afghan war logs, they doubled down, and now we've got Mr. McBride facing life in jail. I pick up on the optimism of what David has just said. This is changing. Momentum is on our side, truth is being revealed, and ordinary people see it. Now, whether they're coming to demos or not, I know, because I'm involved with McBride, I know what's happening, and I know how he felt a year ago, which was a little bit, keep his head down, you know, he doesn't want to look like he's attacking the, you know, the diggers or something, you know. Now he can speak openly and people support it, and it's been a remarkable week to see that. I also believe people feel that for Julian. I'm running out of ideas about what to do for Julian, but all I can say is I thank you from the depths of my heart. To the people that are here today, you really make a difference. My God, when someone's in trouble, and you kind souls, so I'm not talking to the public, I know I'm talking to this group, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Don't shoot the messenger! Don't shoot the messenger! Don't shoot the messenger!
Don't shoot the messenger! Free the truth, free Assange! Don't shoot the messenger! Free the truth, free Assange! Don't shoot the messenger! Free the truth, free Assange!
Don't shoot the messenger! There is only one decision. Free, free! Free, free!
Julian Assange!
Inmate!
Our mate!
Julian Assange!
Inmate!
Our mate! Inmate! Julian Assange! Our mate! Free, free! Free, free! Only one decision. There is only one decision. Inmate. Julian Assange. Our mate.
What do we want? Free Julian Assange. When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Julian Assange.
When do we want it?
Now.
British justice free! And our tapestry of life!
Dump the charges for David McBride. Dump the charges for David McBride. Dump the charges for David McBride. Dump the charges for David McBride.
David, if you had an opportunity to go back and decide which entity to leak the information you did to, or you provide the information, would you consider WikiLeaks as one of your avenues?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they do terrific work. I mean, I wanted journalists to ask questions, and so I really needed an organisation to sort of, you know, do more with the information. But WikiLeaks, of course, they're the best. They've put so many important crimes, you know, evidence on their things. The work they do is incredibly important. It's not necessarily understood, and justice hasn't come, but you could put 100 people in jail as a result of what's already on WikiLeaks.
Yes, we see that various organizations internationally continue to use information that WikiLeaks have published to defend people overseas as well, you know, successfully. Can I also ask you, what would you do if the charges are dropped here in Australia, charges against you?
Well, I'll have to thank all my supporters, I guess. I would still very much continue with the fight, in that it's not a matter of the charges being dropped. I want, in some ways, I want the case to go ahead because I want the major issues to be looked at and to be ventilated.
Yes.
And if they don't, I'm going to write a book. Well, I still got to write a book, but I'm going to push that. I'd like to go to London, and I'd like to try to help Julian if I can, because I think the issues are the same. To say we need to start looking at governments who break the law rather than just people at the very bottom.
So perhaps to have an association and entities joining forces with other whistleblowers around the world?
Absolutely. I mean,
lucky, in some ways the trial has given me a platform, and I'm lucky for people like you to support it. But obviously there are plenty of people like me around the world rotting in jails, and I'd like to be able to help.
So we need more courage foundations that will support whistleblowers.
Yeah, we do.
And we need changes in laws to protect whistleblowers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like all whistleblowers would say the same thing. Before you come after the leaker, you need to take some sort of action against the principal crimes that were resolved. You can't just focus solely on secrecy and avoid people being liable for breaches of the law at the highest level.
It seems that retaliation against whistleblowers is a huge problem, because instead of giving you protection and assessing the information that is provided, these entities that feel threatened go against.
And they're successfully doing it. If I can achieve one thing, I would like to start to break the power of that, and to say that we can't let institutions go after whistleblowers successfully to cover their own corrupt conduct.
Certainly.
You went to see an army psychiatrist, and they tried to tell you that you were kind of just wanted to make a name for yourself.
Oh yeah, they said I had a sense of entitlement, and I need to get over that, and also that it was all in my imagination, and also that I had no legal defence to be a whistleblower. No matter what the government had done, they could put me in jail for talking about it, and which was quite outrageous. And as a psychiatrist, at first you don't immediately think, well, he's been put up to it by the government. But it took me quite a while, and it wasn't until I actually heard through an article on Crikey that they were doing it, the ATO were doing it to other whistleblowers from the tax office, that I put two and two together and thought he was trying to stop me from whistleblowing, if not set me mad.
How unethical.
It's extremely unethical.
For a professional like that, a caring, he's in the caring business to do that to you, to try to disempower you, neutralize you himself when he was there to assist you.
It's incredibly, corrupt. It goes against all medical ethics.
Yes.
He's paid for by the Defence Force. He could have driven me to suicide. It's something I take very seriously.
Free the truth, free Assange, don't shoot the messenger. Free the truth, free Assange. Don't shoot the messenger. Free the truth, free Assange. Don't shoot the messenger. Free the truth, free Assange.